Death at Gallows Green. Chapter 20. Oh, put not your trust in princes, nor in any child of man, for there is no help in them. Prayer Book, 1662. In all of her 9 years, Betsy Oliver had prayed only on one occasion. Mr. Brown, her pet owl, had flown off in a huff after she had taken a live baby rabbit from him and substituted a dead lizard. Betsy had petitioned God for his safe return, and God, who in her imagination bore a remarkable similarity to Father Christmas, the chief difference being that he wore a white robe instead of a red fleece suit and was somewhat less rotund, saw fit to respond by recalling Mr. Brown to his perch in the shed before another night was out. This minor success notwithstanding, Betsy was not given to prayer. It was not that she did not trust God to reply. For evidence of the efficacy of prayer, she had only to look to the safe return of Mr. Brown, but rather she questioned the ethics of the transaction itself. For instance, telling God that you would be a good girl all day in return for a marmalade, biscuits, and tea, when all Mother could put on the table was plain biscuit, wasn't that downright selfish and unjust? It seemed rather shabby to ask God to slip it into Mother's head that she ought to be supplying marmalade biscuits when she couldn't, with the consequence that Mother felt sad when she had to serve up plain or spent more on marmalade than she ought to, or force God to expend divine effort on marmalade miracle, which was admittedly more mundane than loaves and fishes, but no doubt required every bit as much divine ingenuity. Having reached this conclusion, and despite the vicar's benevolent example and the exhortations of Miss Bottle, her Sunday school teacher, Betsy resisted putting God into such a sticky wicket. So when all the other Sunday scholars dutifully bowed their heads and repeated the Lord's Prayer after Miss Bottle, Betsy always sat with head up, eyes forward, and mouth resolutely shut. The murder of her father, however, tested her resolve. For several days after she learned the awful truth, it was all she could do not to fall on her knees and beg God for his return, intuitively feeling that while he could find an errant owl in the dark, it was asking too much to request him to return an escaped soul to the body. Still, she was impressed and somewhat comforted by the solemnity of her father's funeral at St. Mary's in Dedham, and by the gravity of the neighbours as they put the pine box with him into a muddy hole in the churchyard, and especially by the vicar's sombre but fervent prayers for her father's soul. Well, her father had been loving and far kinder than her friend Baxter's father, who fell to flogging his unfortunate wife and children when he got home from the pub on a Saturday night. Betsy had no doubt that the fair and incorruptible God would assign him a premier place in heaven, where he could enjoy his pipe and the view in comfort. But Betsy was less certain about her mother's welfare, and it was that which led her to rethink her position on the matter of prayer. Her mother's £17 a year was not to be dealt out by God, but by the Standing Joint Committee of the County Police Constabulary. A skeptical realist whose experience as the daughter of a policeman had early introduced her to the darker side of human nature, Betsy did not trust the committee's good will. Not only that, but last Sunday's "Oh, put not your trust in princes" still echoed in her mind. She decided to call God's attention to the matter of the pension while there was still time for him to have a hand in things without having to flex a great deal of divine muscle, and went to the church and lay her petition before him. But it was not to St. Mary's in Dedham that she was going. Her collie dog kept trailing after. The God who lived in such a lofty church might be too grand or much too busy to be bothered by the difficulties of small people, so that morning she followed instead a winding lane that led away from Gallows Green in the direction of the River Stour to a very old and plain church built of red brick and flint rubble. She and Kep and Mr. Brown had explored the building and its adjacent cemetery quite often, although this was the first time she had come on official business. She left Kep at the door and went in. Inside it was chilly and dim, the only light coming through the narrow windows of the nave and the rose window above the altar. She went down the north aisle to get to the tiny Lady Chapel, where she slipped behind the rood screen, knelt at the undecorated altar, and said what was on her mind. God, I wish you would keep your eye on the people who are supposed to be giving Mother her pension, because it looks as if they're trying to cheat her out of it, which would be a very bad thing. Amen. Having thus succinctly put her case, she remained still for a minute, waiting to see if God planned to give her some sign that he had heard, a dove perhaps, or even a pigeon. When nothing happened, she stood. She had done what she could. The rest was up to the Almighty.